Hi and welcome to the Prodcast, your fix for everything innovative in advertising and production. I'm Pat Murphy, and I've been working in the industry for more than 35 years now. I've seen a lot of changes, but know there's plenty more around the corner. Each week on the podcast, you'll get to hear from one of the movers and shakers who are shaping the world of advertising for the future. And we'll dive into some of the key challenges facing our sector today and how we're best placed to overcome them. To wrap up 2025, I wanted to look back at some of my favorite moments and guests from the past 12 months. We've covered a huge mix of fascinating topics, from the evolving role of the producer to the power of sonic branding, why being selective with your projects matters more than ever, and even the rise of creator marketing and the opportunities that it can offer for brands. And today, let's start right there with an amazing conversation I had with Ed East, founder of Billion Dollar Boy. When Ed launched BDB back in 2014, he spotted something long before most brands did, that creators aren't just media channels. They're storytellers, producers, and genuine brand partners. 11 years later, BDB is one of the leading creative marketing agencies in the world. Here, Ed breaks down how creative marketing really works for clients and how it differs from the more traditional ad production methods.
Well, look, it's not that dissimilar to, let's say, comparing it to other more traditional forms of advertising. A creative agency will come up with an idea, it will hire a production crew, and a production team will go and make the ad. So if you compare it, the same thing, we come up with the ideas, we give it to a production crew, which are the creators, and they make the ads. It's exactly the same.
And then how do you at BDB navigate the balance between creator freedom, right, and keeping the kind of brand standards that they expect?
So again, I guess it's like when you're a creative agency choosing a production company, the production company will make a pitch. They'll have a sort of a roster of work which feels appropriate for bringing that ad to life. It's just the same with creative marketing. You look at what the creators have produced previously, and you use that to align them to the creative idea you have. And there's a belief element there. Can they bring that to life visually? And will it fit within the type of work they typically do? At which point, the creative we give to the talent is less of a, this is what you have to do. It's more like, this is an inspiration for what you can, and then you turn it into what you think's right. There will be some do's and don'ts. And there are different steps in the production process. So we'll brief a creator, we'll ask them for an idea in response. It can be as detailed or as little detail as needed. We'll go, yes, that sounds great. They go away, they produce it, they return it to us, and then depending on the contract and the scale and the size of the budget, we have different rounds of approvals and amends where we can request changes if it hasn't met the idea that they initially pitched to us. And there are other instances, Pat, where increasingly we do a lot of production ourselves. And what I mean by that is, rather than just letting the creator do the production all themselves, either we support them with the production, or we're actually hiring a production company, which then creators feature in the production, like your talent. It's probably 20% of the business, and it's fast growing. So that's slightly different.
You're a bit of a hybrid, actually. So you're not just an agency, you're also part production house. So you're a bit of a hybrid business.
Yeah, 100%. And we do, I think we describe ourselves as a creative first social agency. So we're really creating social media campaigns. And we create those in a few different ways, which is one, creators producing the assets for the client and for the ads. And then separately, BDB creating those assets too.
Mm-hmm. Now, as you probably read in the marketing press recently, Unilever has recently announced a significant shift in its marketing strategy, placing a stronger emphasis on influencer marketing. I mean, this is a big one.
Yeah.
The company plans to allocate 50% of its advertising budget to social media platforms. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's up from the previous 30%. This move is part of an influencer-first approach on their part. Are you seeing the same trend with other brands?
Yeah, I think just the industry, you see the same sort of trend happening within the industry as a whole. And it's the reason why, influence may disappear to an extent, but the production model, it used to be called influencer marketing. Increasingly, you hear the term creator marketing. There are different reasons why that's happened. My belief is that we're seeing the value shift away from the influence and the eyeballs that influencers bring, but more towards the actual production of the assets that they're creating. And the production model has democratized how you can create content. It's far faster. It's far cheaper than if you compare it to those big creative agencies, big production companies. There's much more diversity, and the quality is much higher. So I think, yes, like that's the reason creator marketing continues to sort of explode. And strangely, in sort of tricky times, like even recently with the tariffs, there's a lack of confidence in where people would spend their money. I find that's where actually influencer does well, because people want to put their money towards more cost-effective ways of producing content.
How do you ensure brands understand the value of creator-led campaigns, especially when production and media costs are now blurred? How do you measure both the investment and the success of a campaign?
A lot of procurement people may hear this. I think there is a challenge there, which is the businesses like Unilever, large sort of FMCG companies, a lot of our clients are those types of clients, increasingly are trying to hold business like ours accountable to very thin margins. But those margins aren't accounting for the creative and the strategic work that has to go into planning for successful campaigns. It's really just the executional elements. They're thinking of it as like a media buy. And there's sort of, as you said, the blurred lines between, with creators, you get both the assets created and you get eyeballs. So the comparisons they're making to other forms are completely wrong. So that's one thing to bear in mind. But then how do we ensure that brands understand the value? So increasingly, depending on the type of client you're working with, so let's say if you're working with a direct-to-consumer brand, we can measure full funnel results. Top of like brand awareness, consideration, conversion, everything from start to finish through tracking. But then if you're working with a brand who is selling through retailers, third-party retailers, then we have developed a proprietary sort of data measurement system. It sits within our tool companion, and we then leverage certain partners depending on what stage of the waterfall it sits in. And we call it a waterfall because it's like a sort of a list of different items. So we partner up with different partners for brand lift studies. We partner up with different partners for econometric modeling. And then Companion at the top of the funnel measures things like engagements, impressions, and those basic metrics. Now, all of those are comparable to any other forms of media. So it's really just trying to create the clarity in how you compare it to others.
A fresh approach to building campaigns that taps into the creativity of influencers and the audiences they've already cultivated. It's proving hugely powerful for brands, and we're excited to see how creator marketing develops in 2026 and beyond. Creator marketing is just one example of how the production industry is evolving at a rapid rate. Combine that with advancements of AI and the shift towards immersive experiences, and it's easy to wonder whether the traditional producer role is becoming obsolete. But according to Steve Davies, Chief Executive of the Advertising Producers Association, the opposite is true. The producer is more essential than ever. The role has just simply evolved. Here's Steve on how he believes the role of producer has changed.
We wrote something years ago, a report in which we had various people writing about what production companies do, and included a director who decided to be anonymous. But he said what production companies have done is they've overvalued the role of the director. And in doing so, they've undervalued the role of production, because it sort of made it sound like the director's the genius and everybody there is just to service their needs. And that's not completely untrue, because, of course, they're vital and critical people. But the producer also has a vital creative role, I think, because if you look at the whole methodology of how you're going to get the thing done, that is just as critical, important and clever, really, as writing the storyboards, in my view. And we have, as an industry, ended up with that role being undervalued.
Do you think the role of the producer is a little misunderstood then, would you say, rather than undervalued, probably misunderstood? Is that a better way of describing it?
I think that's probably true. I think it's probably slightly misunderstood, yeah.
Now, tell me, are you excited or concerned about the integration of AI into the production processes? Surely AI in the hands of a great director can give even more opportunity to be creative within tighter budgets.
I think I'm mainly excited is the answer. Of course, none of us knows the future, but I think we've done lots of AI presentations and studies, and we feel that it's reached a point now where people are feeling more confident about what it's good at and what it isn't good at. We had a superb presentation at the Future of Advertising by William Bartlett from Framestore, who explained exactly why and what you could use it for and what you couldn't. And it's clear from that it's going to be a tool of the human mind, the creative mind, the effectiveness mind, if you like, of getting where you want to get to. And so it's not replacing people on that stage at the moment. But I mean, there are other factors at the moment. One of which is agency legal departments are being extremely cautious about AI use. I mean, I've seen agreements, for example, where they forbid you've got to get the copyright for the whole thing, and they forbid you from putting it back into the system. Well, if you use an OpenAI system, those are the rules of the OpenAI system. So those are inhibiting factors at the moment to its growth. But I think it's clearly going to get better and better, but I think it will remain, a tool of the talented people.
Steve Davies there on the changing role of the producer and how he thinks AI will integrate into the production workflow, becoming a tool of the talented people. When we spoke, Steve also explained how the APA supports its members, helping them to thrive, do business, connect, and come together to address challenges. To hear more about the brilliant work of the APA, you can check out the full episode and Steve from earlier in the year. Now, we at MCA are all about making stuff, something we have in common with my next guest. We know how frustrating it can be when you want to get a production underway, but the client is just dragging their heels or delaying things. Nils Leonard of Uncommon Creative Studio has a rather unique way to ensure stuff actually gets made.
When we started Uncommon, one of our biggest fears wasn't, somewhat madly if you think about it, one of our biggest fears wasn't winning business. It would be that we won the wrong sort of business. And we've all had accounts like this where you spend a year grinding away in meetings and all you've made are decks and you actually haven't made anything. Now, if you're a startup, you're invisible unless you make. You have nothing to talk about, Dean. Your opinions are only good once. You can only launch with a point of view once. After that, the work is the evidence. So we were like, well, how do we force clients to do it? How do we enter an agreement with them in meeting one where they understand we are about output? So we said, well, what if they haven't made anything, by 6 months into the relationship, we just charge them more. So we call it faff tax, which is if you're faffing around, if we're larking about, if there's stakeholders, if you change your mind and we haven't made anything by 6 months, we're going to charge you 25% more. And of course, we've never had to use it once, really. We've had to, we mention it in meetings and everybody laughs. And then I think there's this air of, yeah, okay, we better fucking do it. But honestly, what it's done weirdly is I think it's defined the type of client now that come to us. We just don't attract those guys that don't want to make stuff. We really don't. We can't win those bits of business. It just doesn't work.
So I'm kind of curious about how you win business. Do you participate in pitches or do you kind of operate in the way that BBH used to operate, which was like, we don't take part in pitches. People come to us because they know what they're going to get.
Mostly the latter. We're not arrogant enough to say we don't take part in pitches. Some clients use them and I think very respectfully use them to go and meet a load of people they didn't know. What I would say is we don't take part in anything where people don't know who we are. So we'll never just say yes to being on a list. I think a lot of agencies forget to ask people why they came. And it's telling. The answer is telling. Because, if they say, oh, Nils, I read this thing or I saw this podcast or I saw this bit of work for BA and we want a bit, we want something like Windows, then I understand we're on the same wavelength. If they say, well, mate, you're on a list and, we're quite good, we tend to walk away. The best clients come to us and they go, I've seen this, this and this. I've heard you speak. I know all your stuff. I don't even need to see your creds. What do you think about X? And we have a lot of business like that and touching all the wood in the world. That tends to also make the best work.
Do you actually walk away from business?
Yeah, all the time.
Because that's, it's revenue, that's not coming in through the door.
Yeah, but when you look at it like, you can have really bad revenue. You can have really foul, dependent revenue that doesn't just waste your time, but actually holds you back. And when you view it like that as a startup, like imagine someone pays you for your time. They don't pay you for your work. They don't pay you for your output. They just pay you for your time and they buy up that time. That isn't just you getting paid for your time and kind of going, well, I got some revenue. They're actively stopping you doing something else that can change your life. And when you view it like that, you just don't have fucking time. I don't have time for those relationships. And so I think it's almost a defense mechanic in the studio to walk away from those types of business and to sense them very, very early.
And I guess that keeps the rest of the team pretty motivated because they're working on the kind of clients that really want to be with you.
That's the spoken deal. The deal is, and we purposefully and mechanically tried to be a magnet for talent. And when you think about talent, what talent want most is to make. They don't actually want money. It's all a load of shit that they don't want the best Mac. They don't want a bean bag. They want to make. And the more they make, the happier they are. And if the spoken deal is, if you come here, you will make great work on great brands and your work will matter and you will be famous. And that's the deal. But you'll work hard. You'll work really fast. You'll do things that push you and make you, push you out of your comfort zone. But the deal is you will make. I think that's the right arrangement. That's the arrangement certainly that works at Uncommon.
Where do you find your talent from? Because in our business, we find it more hard to find great talent than it is to find great clients. Would that be the same with you?
Yeah, I think that's true. I actually do think that's true. And I told you before I don't want to be a cynic, but the one thing I'm fighting cynicism around is, I guess what I'd call the exodus of real talent in our business. I look back actually, and I think there's an entire raft of creative leadership that isn't here anymore because they were adopted and stolen by the platforms and to the mothership and they disappear. By the way, Tor Mirren being one, I love that guy, but he could have run probably the most successful American startup of his generation. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm sure Apple are recompensing him handsomely for his time, but I look at a lot of people and I just go, God, there's a whole generation of startups and companies that would exist that don't now. I don't think the industry is attached to as much money as it used to be, and I think that's the clue's in the money, man. I've always had a very open and very tactical relationship with money, which is the Gilbert and George quote: "Make the world to believe in you and to pay heavily for the privilege." I think this industry's forgotten that, and as a result, people who want to make life-changing money and want to do those sorts of things just aren't entering into our game. They're launching their own brands or they're doing all that other stuff. So. Yeah, I think it's tough, and finding talent, particularly in certain markets. I think US is a hard market to find genuinely good talent in.
No, I'm pretty lucky. We've just hired a new president of North America, so I'm sure you'll bump into him at some point, very near the future. How do you personally deal with creative fear? If you're about to pitch or you're talking to a potential client, how do you deal with the kind of? Is there a creative fear with you, or are you just fearless?
We try to remove the concept or try to recognize it for what it really is. Most fear is giving a shit about what someone else thinks. That's most fear in any context in the world, really. And when you think about it creatively, I told my wife once that I was going to give a talk on creative bravery, fearless thinking or something it was called. And she said, fuck off. She said, you don't get to talk about bravery. Firemen get to talk about bravery. You sell cheese. And I was like, yeah, okay. I mean, what we try to do is, and I mean this sincerely, we are more scared of not making, and we are more scared of making bad work than we are of anything else. So I think the only fear I would say that I have is not doing our thinking justice, not going in that room and articulating it the right way, not making it to the best of our ability. That's the only thing we're scared of.
This was such an inspiring and insightful conversation with Nils, all about making, creativity, business, talent, and so much more. I love his advice that not all projects are worth taking on, and that clients should be partners who truly share your vision and values. Brilliant stuff. Finally, to one of my favorite subjects, audio. Simon Elms is founder of Eclectic Music and Bark Soho, and one of the most respected composers in advertising. In our conversation, he didn't hold back about one of the industry's biggest problems, leaving music until the last minute when devising campaigns. Here's what he had to say.
A lot of us have been having this conversation for about the last 30 years, really. I mean, what drives it is that trying to get a treatment over the line, budgeted, a director signed off, is a time-consuming and often quite fractious period, isn't it? There's a lot to do. There's a lot to, be discussed. Countless meetings are had. The detail, people, pore over the detail of treatments, and it's a stressful moment. And I think I'll say the fractures thing because I think often it gets quite punchy at times, and the idea of discussing anything else apart from what's on the table becomes tricky. They don't want to discuss the music. Maybe that's going to be another argument. And the problem is they're missing a trick, really. First of all, I think agencies have lost so much of that sonic branding market over the last 10 to 15 years because of issues like this. If in the same way as they take control of the production, they were to take control of the sound of the production, I think it would placate clients. I think clients now have been approached by sonic branding agencies saying, look, agencies don't do this, we can do it. And they do. I mean, we've had quite a few fantastically good experiences over the last few years where we've been in the room with the agency and the client right from the beginning. And the agency wanted us there. They wanted us to kind of, I don't know, demystify music, make it sort of accessible, and explain the reasoning of why we did what we're doing, what we think we should work, what would work better here. And as soon as you do that, even if you have a very general conversation about what you're going to do, we've got an advert here, it's full of action, the sound design is going to be full on, comprehensive. What place does the music have? Well, maybe it could be incredibly gentle and quiet, and it could be up here, so so that all the bottom end can be for sonic bass drops and all the rest of all that good stuff. It's just that simple conversation you have early on, and then the heat's taken out of the room and people are kind of going, okay, it's not something we necessarily have to have a point of view about. It's about what does this music need to achieve, not what do we like. And as soon as you do that, it all falls away and it becomes cheaper, so much less time consuming, and I think creatively better, for want of a much better word. But I think that's the...
And it is so important because, I think we've heard the phrase, 50% of the effectiveness of an ad is also the sound and the music that is created for it.
Well, no, I mean, that was the famous Tony Kaye quote, wasn't it? He's saying, it's 50% of an advert if he could make the most amazing visuals, but if the sound wasn't right, the advert would be disappointing. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And when you take charge of it early on, it's so much easier and better.
In my first series, I spoke to Steve Keller, who is the strategy director at Studio Resonate with SiriusXM. He talked about the important role music and sound play in our everyday lives and how it helps brands connect. He also talked about a fascinating psychoacoustic experiment he was involved with where hip-hop music was played to cheese and it actually made it age differently. I understand, Simon, that you're also interested in the crossover between music and neuroscience.
I am. And I have been for years. In fact, I read up about that cheese experiment. They played the cheese, A Tribe Called Quest. Apparently, that was the track. I mean, I wondered if the researchers were stoned a lot, because that could have explained something. But there's a great quote which I completely overuse, but I think it's brilliant to talk about music to picture. It's by Sir Thomas Beecham, and he said, "The function of music is to release us from the tyranny of conscious thought." And that's what this whole neuroscience thing is all about. And it's been there for hundreds and hundreds of years. Bach knew it, Mozart knew it, Beethoven knew it, Earth, Wind and Fire know it, but particularly in those old classics, when Beethoven wrote a pastoral symphony, you could sit back there with your eyes closed and you could vividly see the undulating hills and the sheep and the cows. It's programmatic, I think they call that kind of music. It's meant to be vivid. Funnily enough, in the 60s, that kind of a whole notion of, trying to do an audio description of a place, Bombay sunset, or I don't know, lunch in Paris, or whatever it was. That was a really big thing again, because people didn't have TV in the way we have it now. You didn't have that kind of imagery, and even Miles Davies, the notion of sketches of Spain, those kind of, it was a real thing. So I think that's been around. I don't think it's a new phrase. I think that connection with music and sound, music and maybe images is a very powerful relationship, but it's been going on for a long time. And funny enough, this whole kind of sonic branding thing is massive now, and there's a huge amount of research goes in by brands on what music to use for their particular advert.
Audio is so important in ads, and Simon's advice to shift the conversation away from what do we like to what does this music actually need to achieve is such a brilliant perspective to take when crafting your campaign. 50% of the effectiveness of your ad relies on the sound, so don't ignore it, and certainly don't leave it to the last minute. It's been so much fun chatting to these heavy hitters from the world of advertising in Season 4. And we're looking forward to bringing you loads more episodes in 2026 of the Prodcast. If you've enjoyed this, we'd really appreciate it if you could leave us a review in your favourite podcast app, as it helps others to find our show. If you'd like to feature on the Prodcast or have any comments, questions or feedback, please email us at podcast@murphycobb.com. I'm Pat Murphy, CEO of MCA. Do come and connect with us on LinkedIn or Instagram, of which all the links in the notes for this episode will be there. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks again to all my guests, Simon, Nils, Steve, and Ed, and everyone else who appeared this year. Thanks to my team also at MCA and to my production team at What Goes On Media. Have a wonderful holiday and New Year. See you next time.